It all began quietly, like most stories that later shake entire communities. In the heart of Salt Lake City, people had long admired Dawn and Kristen Oakes as the perfect couple. Graceful, calm, and deeply devoted to their faith. Their smiles reflected peace, and their love was the kind that others aspired to. But behind every calm sea, there are unseen waves. One winter afternoon, whispers began to ripple through close circles. It started with a simple question. Have you heard what Kristen finally said? That single line traveled faster than wildfire. At first, no one believed there was anything to talk about. Kristen was private but kind, a quiet presence who supported her husband faithfully at every public event. Lately, however, people began to notice something different. Her smiles were shorter, her eyes more distant, her voice softer. To outsiders it looked like fatigue. But to those who knew her best, it felt like something deeper, a woman carrying a quiet burden. Rumors are strange things. They start as whispers but grow into full-blown stories that take on lives of their own. Soon, people began to speculate that Kristen had been hiding something for years. Some said it was a personal loss. Others hinted it was something from her past before she met Dawn. Nobody knew, yet everyone had an opinion. Her silence only added fuel to the fire. She didn't deny anything, nor did she explain. The calmness that had once been admired now became mysterious. Friends tried to reach out, but she only smiled and said softly, "Some things take time to understand." That one line became the center of every conversation. What did she mean? Was she referring to her marriage, her faith, or a secret no one could guess? By the time spring arrived, the rumor had left her neighborhood and reached the media. Yet Kristen stayed composed, attending church, helping quietly, and refusing to feed the gossip. Her story, however, didn't begin with secrets. Long before the attention and whispers, she was Kristen Meredith McMain, a bright, hopeful young woman who believed kindness could heal anything. She lived simply, volunteering, studying, helping others, finding joy in the smallest moments. And then, one ordinary day, she met Dallin Oakes. He was older, respected, and deeply grounded in faith. But to her, he wasn't the leader everyone admired. He was a man who listened, who made her feel truly seen. Their first conversation was brief, but it left an imprint. No one imagined their paths would cross again. But life has its own rhythm. Friendship grew into trust, and trust became love. Quiet, patient, and sincere. Their relationship wasn't dramatic. It was steady, built on faith and understanding. People often said, "They just fit." Kristen's gentleness softened Dallin's seriousness, and his strength gave her a sense of safety. Together they seemed untouchable. Their wedding was intimate, filled with quiet blessings instead of grand displays. Years passed peacefully, their love admired by many. But behind that peace, Kristen held a part of her life she never shared, a story from long ago that shaped who she became. As Dallin's public role grew, Kristen's life changed. She had never wanted fame. Yet being beside a man of influence meant her world was no longer private. Every word she spoke, every expression, every absence was noticed. If she smiled too little, people whispered she was unhappy. If she stayed home, they said something was wrong. She lived under a microscope but never complained. She found solace in small rituals, reading in her garden, writing in her journal, watching the sunset in silence. She filled those pages with gratitude, faith, and sometimes quiet loneliness. Because fame, no matter how graceful it appears, comes with invisible weight. The world saw her as a picture of calm devotion. But deep down, Kristen knew that one day, the truth she carried would surface. And that day came with a letter. It was a quiet spring morning when Kristen received the letter that changed everything. Among the usual mail sat one envelope with shaky, familiar handwriting. The name on it made her chest tighten. It belonged to someone from her past, a life she had tucked away long before the world knew her as Mrs. Oakes. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were just a few lines, yet they carried the weight of years. It wasn't a threat nor a confession, only a reminder. promise once made, never forgotten. 4 hours she sat in silence, the letter resting in her lap. Memories she had buried decades ago flooded back, of choices made in youth, of love lost, of pain endured quietly. Dawn knew nothing of this chapter. Not because she didn't trust him, but because some truths feel too far away to explain. She had convinced herself long ago that revealing it would only cause confusion. But now the past had found her again. Over the next days, Kristen grew quieter. Her once steady routine became slower, her mind distant. She stopped attending certain events. The light in her eyes dimmed, replaced by reflection and guilt. And soon the whispers returned, louder, sharper, and far less kind. People speculated endlessly. Some claimed she was ill. Others said she was hiding marital troubles. But the truth was simpler. She was battling the return of a memory she could no longer silence. Late at night, while Dawn slept, she would sit by the window, moonlight brushing across her face, the letter open beside her. She would read it again and again, not out of fear, but as if waiting for it to tell her what to do. Weeks passed, and then the inevitable happened. A young journalist, researching a completely different story, stumbled across old archives. Photos, documents, and letters from the 1970s. Among them was Kristen's name. One letter, that same letter, mentioned loss, forgiveness, and a choice that changed her life forever. To the journalist it was fascinating. To the media it was gold. When fragments of the letter appeared online, speculation exploded. Some said Kristen had once been in love with another man. Others claimed she had given up a child. None of it was true, but none of it mattered. The story had been written for her. When Kristen saw the online posts, her heart dropped. A private moment of her past, something deeply personal, was now a public headline. For a long time she sat in silence, then simply closed her laptop and whispered, "It was bound to happen someday." Surprisingly, she didn't feel panic. What she felt was something else, relief. For so long she had feared her past being exposed. Now that it was, the burden felt lighter. Friends called frantically, offering to defend her. Reporters demanded statements. But Kristen chose silence once again. Not because she was afraid, but because she understood that some storms must blow through before the air can clear. Dawn stood by her side quietly, reminding her that truth always survives noise. Together, they waited as the headlines rose and fell. Slowly the world lost interest. But for Kristen, something profound had shifted. She no longer felt the need to hide. She began writing again, this time not in secret journals, but in open letters to young women, about faith, forgiveness, and the beauty of imperfection. She wrote, "The past is not a prison. It's a teacher." Her words touched many, especially those who had once judged her. People began to see her differently, not as a symbol of mystery, but as a woman of grace who faced truth without fear. In time, the rumors faded, replaced by admiration for her strength. And though the world will never fully know the contents of that letter, Kristen finally found peace in something far more powerful than secrecy: honesty. Because silence can protect you, but truth sets you free. And for Kristen Oakes, that freedom was worth every whisper, every rumor, and every storm she had endured.